This week in the enterprise security news, acquisitions, potential IPOs, Terminator Salvation in real life, the first $1 billion one employee business, Mikko puts in his notice, pitch black in real life. Then Tina Srivastava from Badge is with us to discuss identity without secrets. And then finally, we've got two more interviews from RSA Conference 2025 to share. Amit Saha, the Chief Growth Officer of Savient, talks about the shortcomings of a legacy IAM. Then Marty Momjian, General Manager of Ready One and EVP of Services, discusses the launch of Ready One out of Sempris. All that and more in this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control and every executable in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind by visiting securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Catch-Up Day. That is a thing that is today. This is episode 410, recorded on Thursday, June 5th, 2025. Obviously not the way that we normally record these things. We are at Identiverse recording this live. And I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the Dean of Data Science, the Knight of Neurodiversity, the Watcher of Data Center Waste, Jackie McGuire. How you doing?
Hello, I'm fantastic. This is the first time we've recorded in person, so this is really exciting.
It is.
I'm caffeinated after a couple days of conference, so I'm hoping we can go the full 30 minutes.
And it's we're not really set up for doing it live, so it's going to be a little janky. We're going to be sharing my laptop as we go through the news here.
You guys are going to see what this actually looks like behind the scenes, but that makes us relatable, right?
Yeah, right. So we can, I keep saying every time I record something and somebody's like, no, like this morning I did a podcast and Alexandre was like, I had cat hair on my clothes. I was like, yeah, Notebook LM isn't going to do that though.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the younger generation of viewers, like they're so used to the YouTube and podcasts that like they want to see you be a person. It's just a one-person production, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, they don't value slick productions, right? You know, they're pulling out the VHS camcorders. So you can check out securityweekly.com/ESW410 if you want to follow along as we go through the news. If you're watching live and you do that, that might not be updated because I haven't pushed the update yet. So you might have to wait a little bit for that to show up. Certainly, if you're watching the recorded version of this, it will be up and ready to go. All right.
Just like when I lose at Fortnite, blame the lag.
Yeah, blame the lag. This is some serious lag, though. Yeah. This might be a couple hours.
Yeah. I was saying it, for some reason, it took me like 6 hours to upload 2 files yesterday, no matter what Wi-Fi network I was on, 2 different devices. I don't know. So I'm going to say it's not my problem. It's technology in general.
It usually is. Yeah. All right. So the news we've got for today, usually we start with the financial stuff. So we've got an IPO in here. Forescout is talking to returning to public markets, which is they were public and then they were taken private by private equity. We've seen this kind of boomerang effect happen a few times. I think it happened with a few identity companies, actually.
Yeah.
Usually somebody like Vista Equity or what's the other big one?
It's not AXA. What is so lots of private equity. And actually, I think the last security IPO we had was also another company that was taken private, kind of sold for parts and then put back on the public market.
Yeah, in this case, Advent International and Crosspoint Capital Partners
took
Forescout private for $1.4 billion in 2020. And talking about launching it again, I'm not a huge fan of cybersecurity companies going public. I feel like the shareholder expectations and the quarterly focused, being focused on quarterly earnings. In cybersecurity, you have to reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
It moves too quick. There's too much risk for public shareholders to be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
In some cases, it works. If you're Okta, I think it works fine. But if you're focused on any kind of prevention or detection and response, that kind of stuff, I still feel like there's a lot of areas in cybersecurity where we're guessing.
Yeah.
And, those guesses might not work out and the company might have to pivot and the shareholders aren't going to like that.
Well, and I feel the same way about financial companies. Like, I don't understand how it's legal for banks to be publicly traded, because when you are publicly traded legally, your obligation is to do what is in the best interest of your shareholders. And that is not usually your customers. It's not. And so same thing in security is if you are legally
oftentimes
obligated.
it screws the customer.
Yes, exactly. And going through the financial crisis, I worked at Fidelity and they're a privately held company, and watching the just clear cutting that other companies did with workforce and things because they had investors to appease. We were a privately held $3 trillion asset manager, and we did very, very conservative layoffs. We got to make some of the decisions that when you're publicly traded legally, your shareholders can sue you if you make those decisions. And I agree. I think the whole model of public markets needs to be rethought. I think there's Moody's kind of fired some shots across the bow of private capital in the last week. Yeah. And I think in general, there's probably a reckoning coming with how publicly traded companies are set up. PBCs, public benefit corporations, are kind of a new thing. That's what Signal's organized as.
Yeah.
And I would much rather see healthcare companies, finance companies.
And they don't have to care as much about what the shareholders.
Yeah, they can make the choice that's in the public's best interest. And so I think a lot of where life and safety is dependent, those companies should likely be organized as PBCs instead of schedule, like C Corps or whatever they are.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we see some cybersecurity companies go after that.
Yeah.
There's a few I have in mind that I could think going that route, but at the same time, it's just not as attractive to raise money.
Yeah.
Going public, if you're doing it for the money, look at Wiz. Look at some of these companies, they didn't need it. They grew far past the point of where you would have everything you need to go public, and they just didn't need to.
Yeah.
And I've heard that repeatedly from cybersecurity companies that said they were going to IPO. They're like, Netscope was going to IPO 5-8 years ago. I don't know how many years ago now. And they're like, yeah, we just don't need to.
Yeah, well, and private equity and investors don't have a lot of options to put their money because we haven't had robust IPO market. And so I think the pool of investors to choose from, you don't need to go public to be able to continue to raise cash. And it's just become such the norm that no company ever becomes cash flow positive ever, that, when you're after you IPO, that's kind of an expectation that at some point you're going to become cash flow positive. And if you keep, with venture capital and private equity, you don't have to do that, right? You can stay pre-revenue forever.
Yeah. Maybe not forever, but for a long time, for sure. So also in financial news, Zscaler announced they're going to acquire Red Canary, and this caused quite a bit of kerfuffle. I still have not figured out where the rumor came from, but the rumor was that they were acquired for $4 billion. And then the actual number came out because Zscaler's public and they have to publish the deal details, and it was $675 million, which is not
$4 billion. Yeah.
So yeah, people were kind of freaking out. They're like, $4 billion, that doesn't make any sense. That's way too much. That's, especially for an MDR firm. We are seeing higher multiples for MDR firms for these kind of hybrid software services plays out there. Traditionally a services company would be 1 to 2x. Yep. And so we've been seeing 5 to 7x.
Yeah.
And I think the exception, there have been a few exceptions out there, that have broken 10x. But Red Canary looks like they've had some layoffs, looked like they've had some trouble. So it looks like growth was slowing down for them. They crossed 100 million ARR in 2022, 2023. But then they've only added 40 million to that in the last 24 months. So maybe not the growth numbers they were hoping for. So
So I actually
maybe that's
sat
part of the
down.
reason for the exit.
I sat down with Jay Chowdhury, the CEO of Zscaler, yesterday to do an interview,
Yeah.
which will be published in a couple days, talking to him about this. And so I've been very, very bullish on services for a couple years for a number of reasons. The primary being cyber risk insurance. So I used to work in finance. I was 50 state insurance licensed. Did some studying on underwriting, and I think all insurance in the world rolls up to like 6 or 7 companies. It's like Chubb, AXA, Travelers. And so there's all of these reinsurance markets where insurance gets turned into basically like a security and resold. But at the end of the day, those losses all go up to this top of the pyramid. So what's going to happen is any type of financial crisis, any type of real estate crisis, it could even be things like crop insurance, retail insurance. If we have a significant setback in the economy, those underwriting standards will get even more stringent. And after malware and all of the losses associated with ransomware, we already saw cyber risk insurers kind of pull back. So my thought on services is like within 5 years, you won't be able to cover all of the check boxes that you need to get cyber risk insurance, or even if you can, it would be significantly more expensive without managed services. And so this is kind of, I think that's what's pushing this. One of the things I found really interesting that Jay was pointing to, one of the reasons they wanted to pick up Red Canary, is actually their effective deployment of AI and agentic AI. And so if you think about an MDR company, because they're managing detection and response, they can kind of, no two security stacks are the same, but they can create more consistency within their customers, which really allows them to train security agents in a much more consistent way, right? Because the thing that makes it hard to automate security is that no two incidents are the same. So what Jay was saying is that they've gotten to a point with their agentic AI where they've actually been able to automate a number of low risk, high volume, low value things in their managed detection and response that Zscaler feels like all of their customers could really benefit from. So I think that was one of the bigger parts. Jay shared my kind of inclination that services is going to be table stakes for most vendors going forward. But it was really the AI seemed like a big focal point for Zscaler.
Yeah, and I'm a little skeptical. I've seen a lot of these, 6 months before an acquisition, all of a sudden AI is plastered all over everything. So I'm wondering if there's some AI washing going on there, because I worked a lot with Red Canary in the earlier days when I was an industry analyst, and they were pretty efficient, pretty effective, pretty proud of what they built without AI. And we're seeing that AI is actually really slow for security operations. Especially generative AI, the more traditional techniques seem to be quite a bit faster.
Yeah, so when we say agentic AI, I think we're talking about more of like the data parsing, the less subjective and probabilistic stuff, and the more deterministic stuff that we were talking about on day one at Identiverse is because they have so many customers doing like VPC logs is a great example, right? VPC logs are one of the most high volume, low value things until somebody gets in and starts moving laterally, or one of your cloud services goes haywire and just starts sending millions of logs. And so I do think, yes, I think there's tons of AI washing going on, but I had not really seen Red Canary out there talking about AI. So I think that look, Jay is a brilliant dude. He's a very, very smart person. And as a CEO, multiple people who know him well have told me like he's very detail oriented and he's really in there. So I would find it hard to believe that he would do this without really digging into it, but we'll see. I think the biggest thing is that there are very fundamental differences between running a services business and between running a SaaS business. And we were just talking about sales goals and things like that. You can't have a services business on a 3-month sales treadmill. It does not work like that. That's not how things work. And so it'll be what always is the failure here is the merging of the managed services, and and quite frankly, it's usually the services customers who get screwed. So still healthy skepticism because we're in security, but I think it's a good pickup on Zscaler's part.
I think if there is a good use case in these, for agentic AI and handling alert fatigue, that kind of stuff, I think the MDRs, the MSSPs are where we're going to see it first, because their margins are so important to them, and And yeah, it's just not cheap to do it.
Yeah.
Though, so I think by the end of this year, my prediction, we'll have a much better idea if there is a role for this technology in those companies, if it does alleviate some of those challenges.
Yeah.
Or not.
Yeah, it does speed up. Like a lot of companies are like, all right, we're either going to ingest the log raw and put it into Splunk or some other expensive platform, or we're not going to ingest it at all. And I do think there's some amount of intelligent automation that can help alleviate the all or nothing problem, which I find in a lot of earlier security operations.
So being at Identiverse, I wanted to touch on a few new features here. I want to do that real quick because I want to get to the stuff we mentioned in the intro. And there's a couple things that we're going to have to abbreviate this segment so we can get Tina on here.
Yeah.
But Dashlane just announced you can do everything with their password managers with just security keys, no passwords. So I thought that was pretty interesting. It's not a huge announcement, but yeah, it's one of those steps that we need to see before we can really kind of take passwordless serious. Is the thing that manages all my passwords. Can I go passwordless with that?
Yeah.
So, now we can do that. And then the other one, Google Chrome appears to be reworking how credentials are managed in Google Chrome and adding a lot more functionality to the secrets manager that's built in, the password manager built into Google Chrome. So that's cool to see because most people don't have Dashlane or 1Password or something like that. Most people are just going to use whatever's built into the browser.
I hope so Google, if you're listening, please unify payment, wallet, password manager on Chrome, and password manager on Pixel devices, because depending on what browser I'm in and what device, it's still the same Google account. Sometimes I can autofill payment information and passwords, sometimes I can't. And I hope that they're making it better because it's been incredibly frustrating for the last year.
Yeah, and do you want to touch on Operation Spider's Web, and then we'll jump to the squirrel story and wrap up after that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I really wanted to talk about Operation Spider's Web is this really interesting military attack that happened in Russia. So essentially, Ukraine drove, Mack trucks with these Connex as shipping containers on them deep into Russia. So the question was missiles are really expensive, bombs are really expensive. You're literally blowing up millions of dollars at a time. And Russia has this massive bomber fleet, right? And so the question was kind of, how do you, and sorry, if you guys can hear the road construction that just started behind us, I'm not sure. Apparently they're dismantling Identiverse. So what happened essentially is Russia uses lots of bombers and they're older, right? Russia's fleet's older. Yeah. So Ukraine happened to have these 2 Russian bombers in one of their air museums. They took them out. They took all these little drones that cost about $700 a piece.
Oh my God, that's cheap.
Yeah, and they used AI to train these drones on where the most explosive and vulnerable parts of these bombers were. Yeah. And then, so they drive these trucks. There's a remote control that opens.
They're going to use the fuel that's already in them, right?
Yes, and that's the big thing is you don't need as much of a payload if you can use the fuel that's in the planes to blow them up. Yeah. And this is where that funny meme came from with all the tires on the Russian bomber. They were actually doing that. They were putting tires on the wings so that if the bombers were blown up, the shrapnel wouldn't affect the planes next to them because that's what was happening.
Oh, wow.
So they drive these Connexes in. There's a remote control that opens the doors on the top of the Connex. In that Connex is another box that's got a couple hundred drones and their chargers all fully charged.
What
that box
that
opens, and there are videos. You need to go watch these. We'll make sure one of the videos is linked in this.
Can you imagine the sound of a bunch of angry?
Yeah, and it literally sounds like
Terminator
a swarm of
Salvation,
bees,
right? Yeah.
And they lift up and they target with insane specificity the fuel tanks, the propellers, like all of the things that will do the absolute most damage. And they used AI to train these drones with just these 2 old basically what do you say, museum or museum planes that they had. Yeah. And I think the statistic I saw, and somebody I'm sure will pop into the comments and correct me, was they did almost $7 billion worth of damage and took out almost a third of Russia's bombers with this operation. I think the real funny notable here is that Zelensky met with Trump 2 weeks ago and he didn't say anything. And I don't think that was a mistake. And I don't think it was unintentional. I think they absolutely knew that this was the thing that they probably wasn't safe channels of communication to share with us. 'Cause
No,
we're
we've
not necessarily
demonstrated.
an ally.
We don't know what safe channels are.
Yeah. And so, it was just the efficiency.
Knock
here.
off signal variants.
Yeah, because if you think Patriot missiles cost something insane, it's like $3-4 million a piece.
Yeah.
And you're literally just lighting them on fire. And so to be able to accomplish this with drones.
True kind of hacker ethic.
Yes.
In this, yeah.
And I think that's what people loved about it. It's just so scrappy.
That's why we're talking about it here, not because we're going to become, we're not going to start reporting on Ukraine, but this use of AI and tech and drones, like this combination.
It's a whole new front of battle, right? Like we've already said, cybersecurity is the fifth front of war now. And this is the kind of hacker mentality you need when you're facing a force that's 10x the size of yours. Yeah. And you're like, we don't have $10 million.
I'm not sure it's still 10x anymore.
Yeah. But they're like, we don't have, the millions of dollars to blow up. We're not getting the weapons we were before. So I don't know. I love it. I don't love it because it's destruction and warfare, but I love it more than blowing up millions of dollars at a time.
So, one thing I mentioned in the intro, I think it was Anthropic. The CEO predicted the first $1 billion business with one human employee will happen in 2026. I think that's bullshit unless it's a crypto scam.
Yeah.
And if it's a crypto scam, we've already seen that happen, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't help but want to be like, well, what about Builder.ai? It turned out to be 600 engineers in India, not the AI company that we thought it was. Does that count if there's only like one actual real employee that's not a contracted engineer?
Right. Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen.
Nah.
And the other thing I was going to mention here, Mikko Hyppönen put in his notice. He's been at the company most of us know as F-Secure since 1991. Mm-hmm. After his career has been the entire history of cybersecurity. Yeah. So we don't normally talk about when executives move from one business to another, but he is going to, wait for it, anti-drone company.
Yeah. I saw that post.
Anti-drone tech.
Yep. Well, and again,
complete coincidence that we happen to have both those stories in here.
Yeah. I mean, the only way to counter AI-powered drones is going to be with AI-powered defense. And so I think this is something we're going to continue to see, becoming this kind of cat and mouse game of. And if you've seen Dan Magee, I follow on LinkedIn, posts all of these kind of like defense tech videos of like the cages people wear to avoid detection by drones. Have you seen these? The like box suits that they have soldiers. They're like kind of made out of PVC, and it's like a cube you run in because the drone can't tell you're a human if you're a square.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've seen people put on cardboard boxes. I have no idea why this story is coming up in Italian.
You can translate it.
Right. So weird. I didn't even know Wired had an Italian edition.
Interesting.
But this is our squirrel story. Infrared contact lenses are coming that let us see in the dark, even with our eyes closed.
That's gross.
Gross? That's amazing. What are you talking about, gross?
Oh,
you don't think that's cool?
Because they're going to be out for approximately 30 minutes before some gross bro in a basement figures out a way to use them to invade my privacy. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we have to do on this case anytime, or on this show. Anytime new technology comes out, our minds tend to go to, what's the abuse?
Well, yeah.
What are the abuse cases here?
Yeah, I mean, it's always, and I hate to be, a fatalist or negative about it, but with great power becomes great opportunity for exploitation. So
for creepers.
Yeah, I actually saw that Zenni Eyewear, which is a huge online eyewear company, is actually starting to sell anti-face tracking, anti-infrared glasses. So you can buy these lenses that have a reflective coating so that it's harder to do facial recognition.
It's interesting because everybody we're talking to here is like face authentication is the way everything's going. That's how you're going to move through TSA. That's how you're going to move through the airport.
Yeah.
So, fine if you want everything to take extra time. You want to do the freedom frisk and all that. I'm sure there will be a process for people who opt out, but I think convenience is going to win out there.
Yeah, I think this is more for passive tracking, so that when you're just walking around in a
city,
Walmart, or even in a Walmart,
you should have the choice, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can't opt out when you walk into Walmart. They track everything you do. They track your Bluetooth. They know how many shelves you stand at, how long. It's insane.
Yeah, unless you turn off your phone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't even have to join the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
So that I thought that was a pretty interesting squirrel story. Technology is based on nanoparticles capable of absorbing infrared light and converting it into light visible to our eyes. So that's a spectrum we can't see, right?
Yeah.
Like we can see it with a phone, with a camera on a phone, but not with our eyes. So I think that's pretty cool, converting light that's not visible to us into visible light.
Yeah.
It's something that's passive.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's no electronics involved here. So super cool.
Yeah.
And that was the pitch black reference. I think they call it a shine job in the movie that allows him to see in the dark.
Yeah.
Modify his eyeballs so he can see in pitch dark, hence the name pitch black.
I can probably count on one thumb how many Vin Diesel movies I've intentionally watched. So
Yeah.
it's just not up my alley.
All right, that's all we've got for the news today. Stick around. Next up, we've got Tina Srivastava.
Srivastava?
We're
We're going to have to clear it up with her.
We're going to check on that. The co-founder of Badge. She'll be joining us in just a few minutes. This episode is sponsored by Fastly, the application security leader and edge cloud platform behind many top digital experiences. Fastly helps organizations deliver and secure online experiences for their end users through a modern, developer-friendly approach to security. With their next-gen WAF, bot management, and DDoS protections, teams have the tools they need to ensure their applications and APIs perform at their best without sacrificing speed or reliability. Discover how Fastly transforms security into an enabler for digital innovation at securityweekly.com/Fastly. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Today's topic is identity without secrets, and we're excited to have Dr. Tina Srivastava with us today, co-founder of Badge, and we're going to jump into what identity without secrets means. But first, I don't know how embarrassed you get about bios, but you have a very cool bio, and we have to mention at least some of this stuff that you've done. So MIT-trained rocket scientist, entrepreneur, author, books, patents, FAA certified pilot. You've got a YouTube video with like 3 million views of you just explaining how planes stay in the air, right? So that's pretty cool.
Amateur rapper.
Yeah.
I heard
That's not even on the list.
Threw down some bars at the competition the first day of Identiverse.
Yes, well, it's all about getting your MFA rollout.
So, do you have ADHD? Do you just is it like you want to do everything? You just say yes to everything? What led you down so many different paths?
Yeah, so it's weirdly tied together, Adrian. So coming from that aerospace national security background meant that I had a security clearance. So my fingerprints were stored in the Office of Personnel Management, the OPM database.
Yeah.
And when that database got breached, it was this eye-opening moment that how do I prove that I'm Tina without giving up all my private data, my biometrics?
You can't get new fingerprints.
I can't get new fingerprints, exactly. And so, in fact, that national security thread and that breach is why we founded Badge, to make sure that doesn't happen to anyone else.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on, how often do people say, is there anything you haven't done? Do people say that to you a lot? So people say that to me all the time. And Tina and I met at a Sober and Cyber event at RSA. So I sponsored, I personally don't drink, and I always feel better in spaces that other people are drinking. And so we met, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's somebody like me. Because I'm the same way, right? I've done all these different things because I'm always looking for a new challenge. And people are always like, is there anything you haven't done? So when we were talking, it was like when I would tell you, oh yeah, I've done this. You weren't like, wow. You were like, oh yeah, I also did this weird thing. So it was I was like, this is my kind of person. Like, not only
awesome.
Brilliant, but yeah.
It was such a great event, and even just like the reminiscing about Lisa Frank and Punky Brewster. It was a fantastic, well-run event.
I brought all of these Lisa Frank like sticker and coloring books with me to this event, and like put them on all the tables so people could like nerd out with because of course I'm a product of Lisa Frank culture. Yeah.
Proudly.
Of course.
Yeah. So let's jump into it. So the title that we teased here. Let's get into fuzzy cryptography, how you discovered that, and how that leads to better biometrics.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we found that our biometric data had been breached and we were really questioning, why is this data stored? Because if private data, biometric data is stored, it's really only a matter of time until it's breached. And so we started looking into the math, I would say, being nerds, we started looking into the cryptography, and we found this 20-year open problem in that field, in fuzzy extraction. And so fuzzy extraction is, how do you extract a stable key or the same key every time from a fuzzy source, like a biometric, authentication data, things that might be different every time. So dirt, lighting conditions, body temperature, these are things that make it such that you
French
can't
fry
just,
fingers.
Yeah, I break my nose a lot.
There you go. And it means you can't just hash the biometric, because if you have two hashes, they'll only match if they're both exactly the same. And so since they're fuzzy, since they're different, you can't hash it. And so that was really the problem that we tackled, that if you can reliably extract the same key from fuzzy data, then you don't have to store that underlying biometric data, and you can eliminate the risk of stored credentials.
So there's something I want to clarify there, and I'm tempted to say I want to double click on this.
I'll punch your laptop instead of my own, because I don't have one.
What is biometric data today? Like traditionally, how is it stored? Because I know a lot of places say we don't actually store like the image of your face or the image of your fingerprint. It's some kind of algorithm that derives some data weights or
like
something like that.
Yeah.
From the positioning of the whatever it's looking at in your fingerprint, and that's why you have to enroll it from different directions and roll your finger to the side when you enroll and do all that stuff, so it's a clear image of it. But I think there's kind of a misconception there of companies saying that's not your biometric data, but is it?
Yeah, that's really focusing on the right point there, because what it is really all of the secret information about your biometrics. Some people call it the feature vectors, the minutia. What are the unique parts that allow you to identify that, this is Adrian? And you know that it's secret because there's so much effort put around protecting it. So even if they don't call it the raw biometric, maybe they call it a template, it's still something that has to be protected, and something that if it were compromised would compromise your biometric data, that private information.
It's essentially a set of measurements, right? So if you see, like I was walking through and there's the kind of geometric shape around somebody's face, or you see the dots, and it's essentially all of those measurements, right?
Yeah.
So while it's not the actual picture of your fingerprint, there's only so many fingerprints that would have all of those same
They talk
measurements.
about it as if it's like a one-way hash, but I don't think it works like that, right?
Exactly, and the reason it can't be a one-way hash is because from the time you enroll to the time that you authenticate, some things change, right? That's that fuzziness. So the lighting conditions, the dirt, your nose, right? It means that it's a little different. So if it were a hash, the hashes wouldn't match.
Yeah.
And so that's why you have to traditionally store that biometric data at the time of enrollment to compare at the time of authentication.
Yeah, so there's something probabilistic there saying, that's 80%, and the threshold is like 72,
it's like an error tolerance. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Percent likeness to it. Yeah.
Right, and that has been this unsolved cryptographic problem of how do you go from something probabilistic and to something that's actually a cryptographic key. That's it. That's a very binary specific thing, and that's what we've been able to do by solving this fuzzy extraction problem. Now have a repeatable, reliable cryptographic key, even for people that are fuzzy.
Right. So you've kind of bypassed the need to store a secret, right? Where you're generating you've managed to find a way to generate the same key, even if the input is not the same every time. Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm trying to say it in my own words to make sure I understand it.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right, because traditionally you have to store that biometric data, and it's really stored in one of two models. One is a central database, which is what we were just talking about with the OPM breach. You see this going through airports, grocery stores. There's a lot of central database of biometrics, which has all kinds of privacy and regulatory issues. or you store it on the device. So that's like, for example, if it's stored on your phone or on your computer, something like a Face ID or a Touch ID. And in those situations, yes, you can definitely re-authenticate back to that device using your biometric and comparing against the stored biometric. But if you lose or break that device, or you're on a new device, you can't use your biometric to prove it's Adrian. You now have to fall back to password or those security questions, your third grade teacher, your favorite ice cream flavor, and we're finding that attackers are better at knowing that information than we are.
Yeah, I can't remember that stuff, but attackers can find it. Yeah, I don't remember the name of my fourth grade teacher today. Apparently I did 2 weeks ago, but...
Right.
Mine is just full of ridiculous stuff. Like it'll be Hulk Hogan or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I just make up stuff and I put that in my password database, right? None of it's true. None of my answers to any of my secret questions are true.
Right, and then you have to remember what you made up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, hence the password database, which I am heavily dependent on.
Right, yeah, and I would be remiss, we're here in Las Vegas, that MGM casino hack was really from that exploit, right? That you can, as long as there's something to lose or something to forget, you can call into a help desk and say, okay, I don't have my phone, I don't have my two-factor.
Opportunity.
It creates opportunity for an attacker to say, I'm that person, steal the credentials, and launch an attack.
So zooming out a bit before we talk about the specific implementation that you guys have built, this approach, I imagine like it not going to just work for faces. Like you could apply it to different things. Like could it work for fingerprints? Could it work for pets? Could it work for like how far can you take this to uniquely identify a thing?
Yeah, exactly. And great point, Adrian. So we solved this cryptographic problem generally. And so if our customers in healthcare, finance services today use any combination of face, fingerprint, voice, device characteristics, PIN code, whatever factors you want, and it can be in combination. So, face to access your bank balance, add voice or PIN to authorize a high-risk transaction. It could really be any factors. I would say the most difficult factors are those fuzzy factors.
Yeah. Okay. And then specifically what you're building here, is it focused on one specific biometric? Like what you're actually, and I guess I just don't understand much about badge yet. Is this technology you're licensing, or are you building a product? How does badge work as well?
Yeah, so our product is live in production today with customers in healthcare, finance, services, and users use badge every day to log into their most sensitive applications. I would say that face and fingerprint, PIN code, device characteristics are some of the most popular. We even combine folks that have like a physical prox card for building access, tap. The flexibility of badge to use any factors really makes it viable for any use case. And one of our biggest use cases is one around shared devices. So in the healthcare setting, doctors, nurses, clinicians, they have to authenticate to any device in the clinic or across clinics. Bank tellers have to authenticate to different devices in a bank and across bank branches. And so the ability to authenticate to any device and not have that one-to-one binding to a device really unlocks a lot of use cases and secures many users that have traditionally been vulnerable.
Yeah, it was one of the conversations, one of the interviews I did was a company that focuses heavily on healthcare. And that's one of those places where they have like banks of tablets, and you just grab a tablet, the idea is you just grab one and go. Yeah. You don't have one that's permanently assigned to you. And, nursing stations, you got to walk up to something, you got to log something, you got to check out pharmaceuticals, whatever you're doing. Just creates a lot of friction if you need to log in every time, right?
We had a story last week about a CEO, I think it's actually airing in a couple weeks, but a CEO who walked up to a kiosk that was not secured because, again, this is a huge issue. Then I've seen the ones where they just scan like a barcode to log in that's on their badge, and that doesn't seem very secure, but yeah. So I think the alternative to this problem is the smaller hospitals that can't implement a solution like badge or just leaving them unlocked, right? So yeah,
long story short, he was having a bit of an episode and thought he was doing a pen test at a hospital, but he was just a patient.
He wrote a PowerShell script that took like a screenshot every so often and uploaded it to because he was paranoid that because that hospital network had a previous data breach, his data was going to be, he says, because he thought his data would be breached, and he realized, oh no, I'm in here for mental health treatment. What if somebody finds out? But yeah, so.
No, it can be scary. I mean, I know that we talked even at RSA, and you had a great piece afterwards talking about, privacy, the concerns that people have, how this is an evolving concept, and I can certainly understand people being concerned about their medical data, keeping that secure. And again, it's this question of if you have stored credentials that can get compromised, what private data could get exposed.
Yeah, and it's funny. So I was actually reading a story a couple weeks or last week about, this is totally tangential, but like a CIA operative, and I was thinking about this with if you have to store the biometric measurements. He was talking about actually wearing one of those crazy rubber masks from a spy movie. And I was like, how much easier would it be able to be to build one of those masks if you had, just thinking about the crazy stuff that, yes, that's spy movie stuff, but if we're talking about the OPM, how far-fetched is that really, right? And that now I can build one of those crazy masks that has the right biometric measurements because I know what they are because I hacked it off a device. I think we're getting to a world. And I think the other thing is what you recognize with badge is that we're never going to be able to fix legacy stuff. And I think that's where some vendors get bogged down is let's fix what's already happened. And with badge, it's let's just go forward in a better way. So let's stop storing biometrics. It's it's not going to do anything for your biometrics that are already out there in the ether, but at least it disconnects everything going forward from that information, so that those biometrics now are useless, right? They don't mean anything because badge has created this personal key to take the place.
I think you mentioned you can migrate from some of those older systems, right?
That's right, exactly. So, in the banking context, if there's a central database of fingerprint biometrics, which is the case with one of our customers, and, now realizing, okay, the privacy, security, regulatory issues of that, badge can convert an existing database into public keys. And in fact, if you wanted to show it, we've done where kind of keep both alive for a short period of time, show that you never need to use stored biometric data, and then you can fully destroy
just for people's comfort,
Yeah, exactly. And then, and then show that it's never needed. So you don't need to store that. And I think that's really an important message to get across, that a lot of people aren't aware that this breakthrough has happened. And so it's really important to know, hey, it is now possible to authenticate your users, even in these difficult scenarios, like you described, Adrian, with a bunch of tablets in a pool that someone has to pick out. It's actually possible to securely authenticate those users. You don't have to have a central database of biometrics. You can do so in a privacy-preserving way.
And I think the story I wrote that you were talking about is I was we basically, at Zero Trust, we're at an identity conference. We have to live in post-privacy security, and that we have to assume that every single piece of data about us is out there now. And I was saying, I get alerts all the time that the mental health care provider from a company I worked for 10 years ago was compromised, and and I'm I just assume that all of my medical information's out there now, all of my personal information. And so this is almost an imperative because we have to move past those specific individual measurements, because it's all out there, right? So Adrian, to your point, you can convert to these things, which is a really good idea, because if we're in a zero trust world where we assume everything's compromised and nothing's safe, we shouldn't be using static measurements like that.
Well, and so let's talk about that a bit, potential attacks against this approach, liveness checks, all that. Are there hardware requirements? Do you need a certain quality of image? Do you need some kind of depth information about the face, to distinguish between a photo or a live face?
Yeah, this is great. And I know we were chatting about this before. So couple different pieces. So one is third-party testing. So Badge has gone through extensive third-party testing. They have something called PI, which stands for pose, illumination, and expression. So varying the lighting, varying all these conditions, making sure you can authenticate in all those scenarios, checking things like masks, photos, screens, making sure none of those types of attacks can succeed, making sure that you can't do any sort of injection attack, making the the computer think that something came from the camera, but actually it was an AI injected stream. All of that is built in to the system to ensure that only you can authenticate as you. And we've been able to do so in a way that doesn't require custom hardware.
Oh, okay.
That it's possible to just use any 720p camera, which is, you'd be hard pressed to find one that isn't better than that today. And that really is a big difference, that you don't need, custom computer. You don't need, like for example, Windows Hello requires special hardware.
Yeah.
We can leverage any of that. As I mentioned, the
None of my
flexibility
hardware
of
works
badge.
with Windows Hello.
Yeah.
Right. So you can be up and running today and make sure that that's secure, those environments work, and those processes are secure.
Great.
Is there so if, I guess for example, to Adrian's question, if someone, for example, is trying to use a picture of somebody's face, things like that, do you have like a secondary layer of verification built in where it's like this may be, but like, is it possible for a customer to set up a the kind of like wave your hand in front of your face, or at that point do you go to a secondary biometric or secondary key that's stored?
Yeah, so it depends on the organization how they choose to do it. So we have been able to demonstrate, and through third-party testing, that no, photo or screen, even a live moving screen, would be effective. It's stopped and not able to authenticate. But yes, we certainly advocate for multiple factors. There are many scenarios in which you can use that. You can have, again, the flexibility of badge means that you can meet the customer where they are and use what they want to use, what flexibility they have, and you can use a combination of signals that weren't possible to use before. So one of our CISOs was explaining that there were 90 different attributes that they wanted to use to authenticate a person, and if they had access to these, they could make it very frictionless and seamless. But the problem is that storing all that data, some of it being like GPS location, browsing history, it gets very creepy, and it becomes a privacy nightmare to store all that data. Well, what if you could now, in a privacy preserving way, authenticate with that data without ever storing it, without ever having a risk that data's in some database that could be compromised or breached? Well, now you can provide seamless authentication using a lot of these passive factors without incurring a privacy issue.
Awesome.
Yeah, so you mentioned before there's a number of different factors that I think can be combined with it. So the way you're deriving that key, is it using those multiple factors each time? Is it the face data or the face plus the pin, and then you derive the key from it? Or I don't know if that's getting too deep into anything that might be proprietary or.
No, happy to explain. So basically, the system can work in like an N out of M scenario.
Oh,
so you
okay.
can define, any 2 of 3 factors can derive the key, and there's some Shamir sharding and some more cryptography I could dive into, but basically that's how it is. So like a common use case for us are workers on a factory floor. When they're on the factory floor, there are sometimes shared devices, and they might want to use one of those devices to, log in to check their corporate email. So one factor can be that it's one of those approved devices on the factory floor, so kind of a device characteristic, and face. So bam, bam, they're in. Now they go home and they want to check their payroll, so they can use face plus pin. They're not on any sort of corporate device, they're on whatever device they want, face plus pin, there you go. Then if, let's say, they forget their pin, well, when they're at work and they're on the approved device with face, now they can reset their pin. And so it's a nice, controlled environment where they don't fall out of, account recovery. They can use, 2 out of 3 factors.
And is it compliance that's forcing that face plus something? Is like face alone good enough, but you have to do more because compliance says, there has to be multiple factors?
Yeah, so it depends. We do have, obviously some use cases where face is sufficient. Many use cases, for example, the HR app Workday sometimes requires 2-factor. We have customers that use badge to comply with that Workday 2FA mandate.
Gotcha. Okay. And Right now this is enterprise, right? Badge, everything is enterprise, but this technology, do you see like a consumer play here? Like, is there an opportunity for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this means that you are your token, right? You are your key, and you can seamlessly authenticate across any device anywhere. As consumers, we lose our phone, our laptop. People that have come to this conference today, left their device in an Uber. It's like a constant thing for consumers. And we know that it's such a headache when we have to upgrade to a new system, transfer all of our stuff, remember all of our logins. What if you could just buy a brand new device, open it up, look at it, rederive your key, access your data? I mean, what if you could get out of a swimming pool, walk up to a system, drive your key, access your data, and the moment you walk away, there's nothing left behind. There's no secrets, no trail behind you. I mean, that's really the vision that we have for Badge, that you are your token, you can prove who you are anywhere, and that's for all people on the planet.
And I think it's a great time too, because I've noticed increasingly over the last probably 6-12 months, people are really starting to buy into passkeys. So I had not seen, I've noticed a noticeable, both vendors are starting to incorporate passkeys, retailers, all of those things. And so we are now authenticating with our biometrics on our devices most of the time. So I think it's just a matter of converting it from that stored actual information to Badge's information, right?
That's exactly right. And Badge, our customers have implemented Badge as a passkey. We're FIDO compliant. And the other advantage is, one of the challenges with passkey is when you get into provenance attestation, right? If I just airdropped my passkey to Adrian, then he could log in as me. If I have multiple passkeys on a device, it's really hard to tell, if my family member's logging in or am I logging in. And
I feel that I've had that problem.
Yeah.
There's a usability issue with, I mean, talking about passkeys, that's kind of where I was going to go with this. If you walk around this expo floor, you've got people saying, security keys are the future. We just talked about Dashlane now allows you to use security keys to log into your password manager, so you can do passwordless with your password manager. I've always been kind of anti-security key because I'm old enough that I had to use RSA.
You had a keychain.
Hardware tokens that always had to be resynced. You'd have to call the help desk and have it resynced. And I was so happy when we got smartphones and apps for that. I was like, no more stuff on a keychain.
Yeah.
And then security keys come out. I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
I agree with you. It feels a little bit like going backwards, and whatever that thing is on the keychain, it's just a proxy for you. And what if you could be you? What if you don't need that proxy, something that you could lose or someone else could steal?
I've had one break off in a USB port once.
Yeah.
It's but yeah, that's I'm kind of getting a little authentication whiplash with the passkeys are the future, security keys are best. Face is the future. There's so many different options. I've got backup codes stored in my password database for so many different accounts. Every time I log in, I have to use a backup code because the passkey never works right.
Yeah.
I mean, I like that there's options, but I would kind of like the industry to just settle on a workflow because every different system I log into, there's a different workflow. There's another, CRA stuff, I have to use my Okta app.
Yeah.
Just for CRA stuff.
Well,
right?
I think we also need to be realistic about the fact that people are going to share accounts. My husband and I have a shared email account because it makes it so much easier to do everything. And so if we
marketing teams have to share social media accounts, and that was a mess for a long time.
Yeah. So if we could just get to a place where it's like we have two different personal keys for this account, and whichever,
split keys.
Yeah, split keys, and then there's trackability because I know who actually logged into this account, whether it was myself or my spouse, and just a more realistic approach to security than don't share your password. It's like that's not. Yeah. We have to have shared accounts. Like there are some accounts that we both need access to. But it just doesn't work to set him up as an administrator on my email. Like it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, right, I imagine you spend a lot of time on user experience, right? On that workflow.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the magic of this concept that you are your own key. With cryptographic keys, shared accounts, non-repudiation, all of this is trivial, right? And, you don't have to have backup codes and recovery codes. Some people call them an emergency kit. Well, it frankly shouldn't be an emergency that I lost my phone, right?
Yeah. Right.
And yet it is for so many of us. We're so reliant on all the data we stored in there and everything in there. I mean, how freeing and how liberating could it be if you could just go up to any device, prove it's you, access your data, and not have an emergency recovery access code that you needed?
Yeah.
And it also solves the Shaggy problem where nobody can say it wasn't me, right?
Yeah. Well, Tina, thank you so much for joining us today. Learned a lot about that, and I would love to have a version of Badge that I can use one day.
Yeah, if you decide to
as
go
an
the
independent contractor.
if you decide to go the personal route, we'll try it out for you. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm glad I have more Badge users with me today. And yeah, we're just at the beginning here. We've just came out of stealth mode last year, and we've looking around the expo hall, all of our partners are here showcasing Badge. We're integrated with Ping, Okta, Talus, Cisco, CyberArk, Radiant Logic. I mean, it's just been so wonderful to see that pull, see that recognition of the unique differentiator. We're excited to be here.
Great. Yeah, thank you again. And thanks, Jackie, for joining me today for our first in-person Enterprise Security Weekly. This is a lot of fun.
I feel like we need to do this more.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a different feel for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to do these long pauses, and like you don't talk over each other as much. Like you can interject things. Like latency is a big deal.
Yeah, you feel the energy.
You can threaten to ruin other people's laptops when they try to double click on something.
Yeah. Big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. And though this is live, there will be something after this in the package version of this that we send out to YouTube and all the podcast players and stuff like that will have those interviews from RSA with ReadyOne and Savient that I mentioned earlier. And next week, we've got a pre-recorded interview with Rob Allen from ThreatLocker, which Jackie also joined me for. It's a very interesting story that we discussed in that one. Should be a good watch. So keep an eye out for that next week.
Yeah.
Do your end users always, and I mean always, without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1password.
Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We're here recording live from the CyberRisk TV studio and broadcast alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me for this interview is Marty Momjian?
Yes, sir.
Momjian. And you are the EVP of Services for ReadyOne.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about what ReadyOne is. And ReadyOne is a new brand for Sempris.
New platform that is being released this week at RSA.
Excellent. So welcome to the conversation here. I'm very excited to hear about this. I haven't had a lot of time to look into it, so all my questions are going to be genuine here. And first of all, why a separate name? Why a separate domain name for this? That big an offering, or it's that different from the other stuff that Sempris is currently doing?
It's pretty in tune with what Sempris is doing as a whole, where Sempris's main focus has always been the ITDR and pure identity security space when it comes to security controls, detection, recovery for Active Directory and identity. From there, we just had a pretty long history of incident response on the identity space and discovered a pretty big gap really in the cyber response and crisis response side of the house, right? And ReadyOne is essentially a full brand under the Sempris umbrella, full platform with the ties, of course, into the incident response side of Sempris and identity. The main focus for us really on the Ready One side is the incident response and true crisis response
Yeah.
for organizations.
Yeah, so that's the original story why FireEye said that they acquired Mandiant, is their customers would come to them and just said, "Oh, okay, we found something, now what? What are you going to do for us?" And they're like, well, now you have to respond. You have to, it's your problem now, and made sense to be able to say, oh, well, we have incident response services,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, ours really led from my background, Mickey, the Semper's team. Over the years, we did a lot of incident response, true incident response that started as an event, an incident, and then growing into a crisis. And there was always the gap of most organizations have the people, right? They have the people, they have a lot of the processes in place, they just might be outdated.
Yeah.
And technology is so reliant on Active Directory. I laugh because we're an AD security company, right?
Right.
Best in the world when it comes to Active Directory security. We built the platform so it's not integrated with Active Directory, and a lot of customers ask us why.
Yeah.
It's like, well, the reliance is so heavy on Active Directory. We built the resilience response platform for it to not truly be integrated and be out of band because of our experience around doing crisis response and incident response. And the gap is always a lot of the communication, right? The technology people know what to do. Incident responders know what to do. The organization just needs to be able to communicate. They need to be able to document what they're doing. They need to be in a constant prepared state nowadays. So we decided let's build a true platform to enable them to do that.
Yeah. So help me understand, like, how much of this platform is designed to be used left of boom versus right of boom? Is this a case management tool? Is it? Are you testing detections and things like that? What are you doing within the platform?
So a little bit of all of the above. The mission of the platform itself, if you look at it, is to streamline crisis response. And a lot of organizations stay left of boom. They do their tabletop exercises, their preparedness, they get their documentation in order, they work with their partners and vendors. And then it's a lot of, I don't want to say sit around and wait, but an event occurs that turns into a crisis eventually, right? And then there's the response side, right, of boom. You have to coordinate all the people, hope your documentation is up to date. And when you respond, log all the activities, do all the forensics, right? There's a lot of point solutions for those. So our mission was, let's take all those point solutions and consolidate to a true enterprise platform for organizations and companies and businesses to operate out of. So when they are left of boom, they're always in a constant prepared state.
Yeah.
And it's not built just for IT and cyber. We built it for the entire organization, so every end user has access. The consumers of technology have access, the board, the cybersecurity team, the crisis team. So they're self-managing their preparedness. And then when an incident does occur, the organization responds within the single platform. So they're communicating on the same channels in a secure way. They're logging their activities across the enterprise in the same exact platform. So to them, it becomes business as usual when they go right of boom, right? And then afterwards, the after action report, that thing people don't want to do.
Yeah.
And it's the complex, what really happened, when, how, who did it. Let's enable them to do it in the platform as an organization and enterprise, led by the crisis and cyber team and legal and GRC and everybody else that's involved. So it's housed within the platform itself, and we can streamline it end to end. And then when the event is done, go back left of bang, right?
Yeah.
Go back to what gaps did we find? What is Ready One telling us? Let's improve before the next one occurs.
Yeah, so we already been talking this week. Is that an opportunity to use AI to come up with those lessons learned, to analyze all the stuff that has been put into this platform? Summarization is something that it does pretty well.
One of the biggest use cases that we're tackling
Yeah.
is the proper use of AI, right? AI is thrown around so much. We're really looking at it as, what are we going to do with AI with all the data that we are consuming from all of the customers that are on the platform right now? And can we truly have a couple of, I don't want to say simple use cases, but very targeted use cases? Can we take AI and summarize thousands of log entries and then create a one-pager for the executive persona and the stakeholder of, here's what occurred in the incident? Can we also take that same AI process to summarize it for the technical people, right? We're also exploring, in a future state, what do we do with all this incident data to have AI summarize, de-identify all this information, and then share it back out with the community. So there's a community aspect that is truly de-identified by AI, that can share the wealth of knowledge that's in the platform for the community itself.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You're talking about having all the stakeholders in there, but one of the things I often hear, about being important is for an incident response system like this to be out of band somewhat as well. Like you don't want it to be, you don't want an easy path for an attacker to get into your incident response notes. So, how do you deal with that?
So we built this platform from the ground up to be truly out of band, single source.
Okay.
So when you look at the platform itself, 100% browser based and a mobile application.
Oh, nice.
Everything that we've built
so convenient to use also.
Yeah. And it's targeted towards the usability in the UI for the non-cybersecurity person, because everybody else is also involved in managing the incident.
Right.
If you're leading cyber and I'm leading a business operations side of the house, I still need to continue operating as a business.
Yeah.
My users, my consumers, my workforce needs to go somewhere for their documentation.
Yeah.
If I throw a cyber solution at them, they're not going to figure it out because they're finance people.
I don't want to train general counsel on.
Yeah, I don't want to train. Yeah, they're legal. Their job is to be legal. Their job is to protect the organization and us. Their job is not to be cybersecurity experts, right?
Yeah.
So we actually truly did build it from the ground up. So everything is built in-house. We're limiting third-party services and integrations because of third-party risk.
Yeah.
So things like the communication bridges, the legal redaction, the privilege actions, the documentation storage, the incident management side and the frameworks, it's all built in-house on the platform, and we have full dev control over it.
So putting all these pieces together, did you find like and maybe this is one of the reasons that you decided to build it, what are some of the bottlenecks you found you were able to remove in this process where otherwise a lot of companies would get hung up, or maybe information doesn't get centralized in the right places and, communication becomes disjointed?
We want to make it intuitive, which was one of our biggest goals. It's always our driving kind of pillars behind this is make it secure as possible, reduce third-party risk, and then make it easy for the workforce. Make it easy for the non-cybersecurity and non-crisis folks that are using the platform. And our driver behind that was as simple as make the UI easy to consume and make it intuitive, because the biggest problem a lot of organizations face, my previous life as a CISO at a $60 billion conglomerate, was always, I have all these great plans. Nobody updates anything unless my audit folks and legal show up and they're like, you got a month, you got to update everything. Audit's coming, right?
Yeah.
But let's make it so it's easy to consume for the workforce. So they go in, they update their own documentation, their own processes, they self-manage it, and remove the bottleneck of having to force it on to different teams and people, and enable them to actually go in and build what they need to be resilient to support cybersecurity in crisis.
And so a few questions. Did I hear it correct in that does this do any actual testing of detections or anything, or is it more of just the management platform where
it's more the management,
putting notes and things like that?
It's the management platform. What we're looking at the testing side of it is we're after figuring out, working with partners and customers, the true resilience score. Resilience is the big buzzword for the year, right? I ask most organizations, have you defined resilience and then cyber resilience?
Yeah.
Resilience is people, process, technology, incident response, having my house in order, keeping it always up to date is not easy. What we're trying to figure out and working towards figuring out is what is a true resilience score that we can assign, pulling information in from MITRE, the ISACs, following what CISA and NIST recommend, following what partners recommend, right, in the industry, and saying, let's actually, instead of doing vulnerability scanning, pulling in threat feeds, let's take the systems, the processes, the assets a customer has in the platform. Do they have a response plan attached to that asset? Are the people defined? Is the documentation up to date? And the platform's purpose is to make sure the people do keep the processes up to date. If that piece of infrastructure system service becomes unavailable, but also have the people attached with the right notification at the right time that will alert them, upstream to do incident response, downstream to the impacted parties at the same exact time. And that's the automation that we're introducing. We want to go a step further and start integrating with third parties to make sure the systems are backed up. Right now we have the documentation, the people, the backup, recovery capabilities for it.
Yeah, so and preparedness.
And the true resilience and preparedness score. So if something does go out of whack at the end of the day, the score drops, the stakeholders get a notification, the workforce gets a notification, and it's their purpose to make sure it's back up to date and in good standing within the platform.
Yeah. And, it seems to me a lot of resilience is knowing ahead of time what's going to happen with your systems. So is this something that's going to encourage tabletops, the kinds of activities that you would want to do, because an incident can be a very emotional time, and how you respond in those situations. If you're expecting it, if you've already gone through these steps, if you already know how to use your tools to find things, is this something that can encourage some of that activity?
That's what we're going for. I've done a lot of incident response as an incident responder, incident commander, breach coach.
Yeah.
All eyes are on
chief incident handler for 5 years of my career.
Yeah. There you go. What's the biggest issue we run into, right? It's always communications, and all eyes are on cybersecurity.
Yeah.
My take on it was leave the incident response team alone. They know what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
But let's enable everybody else to see what they have to and how they are impacted within the platform to remove the stress from the cybersecurity and the crisis team and the incident handlers and the incident responders. So they have their personas, their dashboards, their tools, and their access in a single platform. But for everybody else, access to their platform based off their persona, so they can go into Ready One and see how are they impacted and bridge that communication gap between the business, the cybersecurity team, the crisis team, and anybody else that needs to be aware, and remove the stress for them, right?
Yeah.
Because what happens in an incident, things go south, everybody turns into looking at cyber because cyber is good at process.
Mm-hmm.
IR is good at process. That's what their responders do.
Yeah.
Let's elevate them a little bit and honestly create a firewall between the cyber and the crisis and legal team so they can do their work and give everybody else in the organization the ability to access what they need to continue operating without their infrastructure and their technology running.
And it doesn't seem like it's a very high bar to clear, but I imagine maybe SecOps, the IR CERT teams are the buyers here, the ones that are going to be building up and managing the platform. Though you said, once you get it up and running, people manage their own stuff. You give them access to the platform. But I imagine your main competitor here is going to be Google Docs. So
funny enough, it is.
Yeah. So you've got to be. I mean, it's not hard to be better than Google Docs from a feature standpoint, but it's hard to be better than Google Docs in the amount of time it takes to get it going. Google Docs template, 10 seconds, I'm already putting information into it, right?
We're tackling the problem of data leakage there, right? I look at it as if you don't give the workforce...
That Google Docs is always going to be on a platform that's potentially already compromised.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And identity management, right? If you roll out Ready One to 30,000, 50,000 users, they download the mobile application, secure enclaves enabled, we push passwordless to the end user, they don't have to remember a second password. Yeah. Google Docs, you're not going to manage another 40,000 identities unless you integrate with Active Directory in your IDP. Yeah. Let's remove that barrier and that friction.
Right.
2, if you go out of band, most organizations implement Google Docs on top of Office 365. Yeah. And they go buy Zoom on top of Teams, right? And I got to do my incident logging somewhere. I'm going to do it in spreadsheets. Let's remove out all that and single source it. Our secret sauce really is the tabletop side of the house.
Yeah.
It generally takes months to set up a tabletop, go through scenarios. There's some great technologies out there for simulations.
You got to be creative. Yeah.
And how do I get an enterprise-wide tabletop? It doesn't happen. We focus on cyber. We find all the gaps. It takes us months to do an after-action report. We've reduced that time with 30-minute deployment of Ready One. Set up your incident response team, stand up a scribe log. We include the bridges, the escalation paths inside of it, and you can do a tabletop within 7 business days with cyber, the risk team, the stakeholders, the crisis team. And the after-action report that takes months to produce is minutes inside of Ready One.
Nice.
So, and that's one of the ways that we're tackling with true segmented AI that is instance-based per customer base, is let's generate that, and then let's make it something that's consumable for the non-cybersecurity person so we can track the gaps within Ready One, and then do a tabletop again the next quarter.
Yeah. Yeah, because some of that cyber resilience is up here. It's people being prepared for, okay, here's how it's going to go down, here's the steps, here's what we go through.
How do I take that knowledge out of... I say this a lot, right? Most companies nowadays are technology companies that happen to provide another service. I come from healthcare. we were technology companies that are good at taking care of patients.
Right.
The airlines are technology companies that are amazing at scheduling, and they happen to own a bunch of airplanes.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Manufacturing is like IT companies that are good at manufacturing products and robotics.
Yeah.
Right. So, and there's resellers, big Fortune 50 companies. There's supply chain companies
Yeah.
that are good at technology that also happen to do supply chain to get goods to a
Yeah.
consumer.
Logistics. Yeah.
Let's take all that knowledge in their head, have them put it into Ready One, so when an incident happens, they don't have to think about where to go, where to find it, how to continue operating. They log in, and what they need is right in front of them to trigger their response actions and say, oh yes, here's my forensic logging, my actions, my runbooks and playbooks in a single spot for IR.
Yeah.
To the workforce, it's here's how I do payroll when my payroll system is offline, because they practice it in the tabletop and they self-managed it.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you
Awesome.
so much for joining me today, Marty.
Yeah, thank you
Enjoyed
for
the
having me.
conversation.
It was awesome.
Legitimately excited about the product.
Yeah, definitely, and come by the booth. So
Yeah. I'm going to carve out some expo time.
awesome.
Yeah. All right. To find out more about Sempris and Ready One, you can visit securityweekly.com/Sempris RSAC. For all RSAC 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thanks again, Marty, for joining me, and stick around. We'll be back after the break with more interviews live from RSAC Conference 2025.
Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We are recording this interview after RSA 2025, so please just pretend that we are enjoying the ambiance of Broadcast Alley right now. I am your host, Mandy Logan, and I am joined by Amit Sahav, I want to make sure I get this right, Chief Growth Officer, because I really enjoy that title. I really enjoy that is your title. Chief Growth Officer and co-founder at Savient. Welcome, Amit.
Thank you, Mandy, for having me today.
I am so glad you are here. And this is a fascinating intersection of topics to discuss. So I'm very curious with Savient positioning and bringing forth capabilities for enterprises facing the convergence of AI and needing to handle identity management while we are becoming, we're at the precipice of an incredible onslaught of the amount of non-human identities that are taking over. And I am very interested. So why do you hold that current IAM models and security measures are not going to keep up?
Yeah, absolutely, Mandy. I think there are a couple of key reasons. I think traditionally, when the market has looked at identity governance and administration tools, the primary driver always has been, we are just trying to meet compliance objectives, which are where you are just looking at what kind of an access a person has and just ensuring that someone reviews that access on a periodic basis, right? So that's a very rudimentary level of security control that some of the compliance controls are asking for. And that's the least that organizations are trying to deliver. Or sometimes the organizations are looking at IGA from an automation standpoint, where you are just trying to ensure that anytime someone is requesting for access, you just get them the right access very quickly so that they can get productive very quickly in the environment. And I think, with the whole concept of identity being the new perimeter, all of that is out of the window, right? Or most organizations that we have been engaging with, they are really looking at this being a golden opportunity for them to rethink how identity needs to be reevaluated in the organization. How do they ensure that they are putting in the right controls, which ensure that only the right people get access to the right assets whenever the right business requirement is there. And then, like you rightly mentioned, it's not about just the right person, but also the right non-human getting access to the right assets.
Absolutely. I mean, do you find it as intriguing as I do to think about the sheer number of non-human identities that we will be faced with in the next 3 or 4 years, and think about in the coming decades?
Absolutely. I think, when we look at the traditional on-premise architecture, there used to be a healthy mix of human and non-human access within the on-premise environment as well. But I think once you look at cloud, and the greater interaction between all the different type of microservices and APIs that are floating around in your cloud environment, it just has gone to the next level, right? In terms of how many non-human identities are there within an organization today, and how do we ensure that we are putting in the right access controls and the right governance controls for securing those non-human assets on the cloud.
Amit, I am curious from your customer base or your own personal experiences right now, what are complications that you see resulting from the business use of AI right now?
Certainly, I think any organization who is not evaluating AI to be part of their IT architecture is already behind in the market. So definitely, there is a lot of opportunity for organizations to leverage AI across the board, not only to improve their business but also to improve their security posture. And I think many organizations are, I would say, cautiously curious in terms of how AI can be leveraged to again strengthen their identity security perimeter. And they are aware about some of the potential risks that could happen if you don't handle AI well enough. Simply because when you are dealing with very sensitive information like, who has access to financially significant documents in my organization,
Mhm.
and if you are feeding that information to AI, and if someone is working with your IGA controls, sometimes there is a risk of that information being leaked to unwarranted resource sources, right? So organizations are definitely conscious about how to leverage AI to not only improve their governance processes, but also to leapfrog it and make the overall governance processes more dynamic, more real time, where we can weigh in a lot more risk signals than before, and be able to take decisions at scale.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, being able to have more immediate risk analysis from being able to integrate the AI tools is, to me, if I put myself in the security team's position or in the CISO's position and looking at the number of not only endpoints, the attack vectors, all the things that are being handled, being able to have real time risk from these newly adopted tools. I mean, for you, how long has it been that you have used AI to augment identity and access management?
Yeah, I think from a Savient perspective, we have been on the what I call as intelligence journey for
Okay.
over 7 or 8 years now,
Okay.
and we have always used the latest tools that are available at our disposal to ensure that we are always on the cutting edge and we are always taking any and every opportunity that presents itself. So things like using machine learning techniques to improve the security controls, ensuring that we are able to uh, peruse through different types of risk signals and ensure that we are able to give the right recommendations to the end users so that they can take the right decisions
Mhm.
in terms of securing their identity perimeter. That has always been a continuous evolving journey for us. And I think AI has just allowed us to amplify and ensure that the accuracy of a lot of those recommendations that the system has been delivering is much more accurate, right? Much more improved.
Right.
And that's what we are seeing. A great opportunity for us is to ensure that we are bringing in now risk signals from all different types of sources, whether it is the device, whether it is the network, whether it is the human itself, or whether it is the non-human interacting with other non-human identities in your environment. How can we bring those complex relationships, the real-time activity, the behavior, combine a lot of all those different risk signals, and then give you more accurate recommendations in terms of, should you stop this particular transaction that is
Right.
happening in the environment, or should you allow it? If you have concerns, then should you just allow it for a short duration rather than giving that access in perpetuity? So a lot of those decisions are being now, we have the platform that allows us to make a lot of those decisions in real time and at scale.
That's fantastic. And, at RSAC, very often we focus on large enterprises. And I'm curious with Savient, have you found anything that particularly assisted mid-size organizations? with switching to the modernization that Savient offers?
Mandy, could you repeat the question? I think we lost
Sure.
in between.
Okay. So that is fantastic. And I'm curious. So often at RSAC, we focus on very large enterprises, and yet medium and small enterprises are just as vulnerable to people, leveraging every single vector against them. And I'm curious for potential customers of Savient or teams adopting your modernization of identity and access management. Have you seen or found any particular niche that you thought was very useful for smaller size organizations?
Yeah, so I think Mandy, that's an excellent question, and the way we look at it is, identity governance and administration programs typically in the traditional mindset used to be very expensive programs. You used to put in a lot of resources, a lot of investments to ensure that the programs are successful, simply because they touch a lot of aspects of every employee or every external entity or user that you have who is interacting with your assets. And that has been restricted to select domains, select large enterprises who have those resources to spare, and ensure that the identity programs have been successful. And I think the biggest advantage that AI has brought forward is how do we ensure that some of the mundane or the routine activities that used to take a lot of effort in the traditional IGA landscape are now simplified and automated to a large extent with AI that has been introduced in every dimension of the platform. So if you look at Savient, some of the techniques that we have leveraged are things like how can we simplify the entire integration process and integration experience
Right.
of how do you onboard more applications onto your governance platform so that you can start automating all the identity and security controls for that platform, right? So we have eliminated a
Right.
lot of the friction that you used to traditionally have. Similarly, when you are talking about rolling out new IGA processes to end users, there used to be a lot of friction where you used to embark upon a very big training and enablement journey where you are educating the users on how to request, what should they request, who should be approving it. Now, a lot of those tools have been or the process or the workflows have been simplified by introduction of AI, where we are able to give the right recommendations to the end users saying what should they be requesting for, how long should they be requesting for, or we are eliminating a lot of the guesswork from the decision makers in the organization, who now have great tools that help them visualize that if I approve this request, what is the change from a risk posture perspective in an organization, and based on that, should I approve this access in perpetuity, or should I give this access only for the next 4 hours that the person is looking for, or should I put in a different reporting mechanism so that even if I'm giving the access, I'm putting a more rigor around reviewing that access, right? So I think a lot of these AI tools have eliminated the expense that is needed to adopt a lot of these IGA platforms successfully in the organization. And that's why I feel a lot of the small and medium sized businesses who have just the same amount of exposure, just like a large enterprise, are now much more confident in terms of leveraging the AI powered IGA platforms out there, and really doing their best in terms of trying to secure all the risky assets or the critical assets that they have in the organization.
That fills me with a lot of hope, honestly. I mean, if I'm coming from a security team and I see that Savient has this track record of having incorporated AI tools and stayed at, like you said, at the head of what do you call it, the intelligence
Suite. Yep.
Yes. Yep. Then that, if I'm on the security team, I go like, okay, wow, I can understand how and why this would simplify our process. And I'm curious then too, my next question would be, what sort of proof of concept or trial does Savient offer? Like how quickly would I see that, oh, this is providing me a benefit right now?
Certainly. That's a great question again, Mandy. So one of the things that we announced at RSA, which we're really proud of the accomplishment that we have been able to bring forward in the market, is what we call as identity security posture management. So in a way, it is sort of a distillation of 10 years of our company's journey in terms of really honing in what are the different risk signals, what are the vectors that we need to evaluate so that we can identify the identity and access related risks for every type of identity out there, whether it is a human identity, whether it is a workforce, or whether it is your supply chain human access, or it could be privileged access. Or non-human access, right? And now,
Right.
as you are moving forward, agentic AI identities as well, what kind of
Yes.
access risks exist for them? And I think ISPM as a platform has allowed us to bring in a lot of those learnings and ensure that we are able to deliver that visibility very quickly. And then what we have done is, on top of that, we have put in a lot of our learning from how do we refine how we calculate risk in an organization. So what we also did along with the ISPM product launch is introduce the whole concept of a trust score. So essentially, every human's interaction with a particular data artifact in the organization has a trust score associated with that. And if the trust score is high,
Ah,
you can reduce a lot of friction. Like, you don't have to get as many approvals as you need before you get access to a new asset.
and
Or
I'm curious on that. When and how is the trust score assigned, and then how is it augmented?
Yeah, so that's a continuous journey, right? I mean, when
Okay.
we start with the implementation, we look at the current situation in terms of how the access was granted, when was it granted, how often was it reviewed, is it being used the right way, and then we baseline the trust score, right? And as
Okay.
and when the person's access evolves in the organization, as you probably change jobs, you change roles, or you're working on different projects and assignments, we are continuously reevaluating that trust score, and we are ensuring that it's always accurate. And that becomes the single biggest artifact in terms of how do we then determine and say that, what is being recommended, what is being approved, how much access do you need in the organization.
Fantastic. I So again, thinking if I'm onboarding Savient, I have my entire security stack. I have what I'm used to using for identity and access management. What is something else that I would face as I am really trying to stay at least on the cutting edge of modernization? What other things would I be facing, and what other challenges would come up, and what other support does Savient provide?
Yeah, I think we have seen organizations of all different shapes, sizes, and level of maturity, and I think
Okay.
everyone has made an attempt to implement some sort of identity management tool in their environment. Some have custom homegrown tools, some have got commercial products that they have deployed on-prem or on the cloud, and they have varied success in terms of adopting and building those processes out. Obviously, as you would see at RSA as well, a lot of the identity security players are talking about a platform based approach, right? Where you have
Correct.
got different types of features, functionalities, different type of products, all delivered from a one single holistic platform. But what is really important here is to appreciate that a lot of investment has gone in at our customers to manage identities over a period of time. And how do we ensure that we appreciate a lot of those investments and make the platform that we are now trying to introduce modular in nature, so that we can leverage a lot of the processes and the data or the intelligence that is sitting in their environment, and ensure that we are able to take that, transform it, and ensure that it is able to drive and improve the future set of identity security posture that we are delivering within the organization. So it is really important for us to ensure that as we are introducing new technology, it is modular enough, it is augmenting the white spaces in your environment where you might have you don't have enough oversight in terms of the identity security risk. How do you prioritize those, get those under the ISPM oversight, and then you can start refining, okay, which processes do I need to improve first, right?
Right.
Which are the type of identities that I need to start securing first, and then ensure that over a period of time I'm able to realize the value with the organization without disrupting a lot of the processes that have already been implemented in the organization.
Oh, fantastic. So, to wrap up, I'm shocked that our time is already coming to an end. This is a fascinating subject. And because you and Savient have potentially, I'm going to say 2 to 8 times the length of time with experiencing AI and putting it toward this identity and access management. When you take that experience and you forecast ahead, what do you feel are 1 or 2 of the largest challenges facing enterprises in the coming future?
Yeah, I think it will be in terms of ensuring that as we are introducing a lot of these new processes, new changes in the organization, we ensure that we are causing the least amount of disruption.
Okay.
But also ensuring that the new controls can stand the test of time, right? Which is what we call as
Right.
being future ready. So it is very important to ensure that as you are building in the new processes, just adopt the zero trust principles
Mhm.
wholeheartedly, which is basically what it means is not only put controls, but ensure that you are continuously monitoring those controls from an effectiveness standpoint. You are continuously refining those controls to ensure that they stay efficient within the organization, and it can adapt very quickly as your organization changes or the demand evolve over a period of time. I would say that has been the single most biggest challenge when it comes to the traditional IGA that we are trying to
Oh,
address here. From a cloud perspective, it definitely brings us a lot of agility in terms of how we are building the product, we are building the platform, and we are bringing those capabilities to our customers. And what we are really looking for here is customers to feel empowered that on the platform
yeah.
they have the right level of access, right level of customization that they can do to automate the workflows, to ensure that the identity security tools are able to cater and adapt to the organization's requirements in the best possible way. So for me, that is very important to ensure that the platform is future ready, but it is something that really embraces all the sharp edges and the curves that any organization has, which makes it unique.
Fantastic. Now, and I hold the idea that overall identity is security. I mean, it kind of comes down to that. I also think that security can be just, it's a feeling, but it becomes from actual, either actionable intel or the data that sounds like Savient is helping its customers make. So, Amit, thank you so very much for joining us. And I hope that even though RSAC is technically over, that you have a fantastic rest of the show.
Thank you, Mandy. The journey definitely continues.
Excellent. So thank you for joining us today. Now, to find out more about Savient, please visit securityweekly.com/Savient RSAC. And that is SAVIYN TRSAC. For all RSAC 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thanks again, Amit.
Thank you.